AITA for setting up a camera in my boyfriend's room to catch his sister stealing my stuff, and now refusing to go back to their house. I never thought I would be in a situation like this. I mean, sure, I've had my fair share of annoying roommate situations, and I've definitely dealt with people who don't respect personal space, but this? This was a whole new level of disrespect. For context, my boyfriend and I live close to each other, just a few streets apart. Because of that, I end up spending a lot of time at his place. Naturally, over time, I started leaving a few things there, basic stuff, really. A toothbrush, some hair ties, a spare hoodie for when it gets cold, and eventually, things like my shampoo, conditioner, skin care, and even a couple of outfits so I wouldn't have to haul everything back and forth all the time. It just made sense. Now, my boyfriend lives with his mom and his younger sister. His mom and I have always had a bit of a tense relationship. She's the kind of person who believes her kids can do no wrong, and she has this weirdly possessive attitude toward my boyfriend, like she subtly resents the fact that he has a girlfriend. His sister, on the other hand, is, let's just say she's not exactly the most considerate person in the world. She's younger than us, still in school, and has a bit of an entitled attitude that their mom fully enables. At first, things seemed fine. Sure, I noticed a couple of small things going missing, little items, like a hair tie I swore I left on my boyfriend's nightstand or a lip balm I was sure I had in my bag, but I brushed it off. I have ADHD, and losing track of things is kind of my brand. I figured I just misplaced them. But then things started getting weirder. It started with my skincare. I had a very specific set of products I used, and I noticed that some of my bottles seemed lighter than they should be. Again, I second-guessed myself. Maybe I was just using more than I realized. But then my razor went missing. I was absolutely sure I had left it there, and then one day, it was just gone. My boyfriend looked for it too, nothing. A few days later, I spotted it in the bathroom, but now, it looked used. And not by me. Then came the incident. I had just bought a brand new, 1-liter bottle of Wella conditioner. If you know, this stuff is not cheap. But hair care is important to me, so I splurged. I also bought the matching shampoo. I brought them over to my boyfriend's place and left them there, thinking I'd finally have a proper shower setup without having to lug things back and forth. A week later, I went to use my conditioner, and my heart dropped. The bottle was nearly half empty. Now, here's the thing, I use more shampoo than conditioner. Always have. But my shampoo bottle? Completely fine. Meanwhile, my conditioner was vanishing at an alarming rate. That made 0 sense. And then I remembered something. A few weeks prior, my boyfriend's sister had been complaining about how she goes through conditioner so fast and how she always has to buy more. And suddenly, she just stopped complaining. Coincidence? I didn't think so. At that point, I was done second-guessing myself. I knew something was up, and I needed proof. So I did something drastic. I set up a camera in my boyfriend's room. Now, before anyone freaks out, I wasn't spying on anyone. The camera was facing the exact spot where I kept my things. It wasn't in a shared bathroom or anywhere inappropriate. It was literally just aimed at my personal stuff. And honestly, I wasn't even expecting much. I thought maybe I'd catch her grabbing a bottle here and there. Oh, how wrong I was. Over the next few days, I got my proof. Not only was his sister taking my stuff, but she was doing it constantly. She wasn't just using my conditioner, she was going through my personal bag. Like, straight up opening it and rummaging through my things. I even caught her doing it twice in one day. I was livid. At this point, my boyfriend and I both agreed that we needed to confront her. But we didn't want it to turn into a huge fight, so we decided to talk to his mom first. We figured she would at least try to mediate and handle it maturely. Big mistake. We sat her down, explained what had been happening, and showed her the footage. And his sister? She lied. To our faces. With video evidence right in front of her. She had the audacity to act completely shocked, pretending like she had no idea what we were talking about. And then, just when I thought the situation couldn't get worse, his mom turned it around on me. She didn't say a single word to her daughter about taking my stuff. Not one. Instead, she went straight to attacking me. She accused me of violating their privacy, saying I had no right to put a camera in their house without her permission. Never mind the fact that I was trying to protect my belongings from being stolen. No, apparently, that was the real crime here. And then, because apparently, she hadn't said enough hurtful things, she added, "It's always your trauma and your ADHD, so you're never wrong." I just sat there for a second, completely stunned. I had expected some kind of resistance, but this was pure gaslighting. I took a deep breath and said, "I'm gonna leave now because this conversation is no longer rational. But go ahead and make me the villain so you can keep letting your daughter avoid responsibility." And then I walked out. His mom never apologized. His sister never admitted to what she did. And my boyfriend? He's devastated. He's been feeling sick over the whole thing, barely eating, constantly stressed. He feels stuck. He knows his family is in the wrong, but he also feels powerless to do anything about it. And honestly, I don't even know how to feel anymore. I know I was right to defend myself. I know I was right to set up that camera. But now, I'm being painted as some kind of villain for proving that I was being stolen from. So am I the asshole? Update 1. After that disaster of a confrontation, I decided I wasn't going to let this go. If his sister wanted to steal my stuff, I was going to make sure she regretted it. Clearly, reasoning with her, or her mother, was useless. The fact that she could sit there, look at video evidence of herself going through my things, and still deny it with a straight face proved that she wasn't just shameless, she fully believed she could get away with it. And why wouldn't she? Her mother had her back no matter what. There were no consequences. She could take my things, lie about it, and somehow I was the villain for catching her in the act. Fine. If she wanted to play games, I was going to play right back. The next day, I went out and bought a new bottle of conditioner, the same brand, same size, same everything. But this time, I had a plan. I picked up a bottle of semi-permanent purple hair dye, not the kind that stains permanently, just the kind that lingers for a few washes if you don't notice it right away. I mixed a hefty amount into the conditioner, shook it up until it blended seamlessly, and placed it right back on the shelf where my old one had been. I didn't say a word to my boyfriend. I didn't tell him what I had done because, honestly, I wanted plausible deniability. And then, I waited. It took a few days, but then it happened. I was in the middle of running errands when my phone buzzed with a text from my boyfriend. "What did you do?" That was it. No context, no explanation. Just 5 words that immediately told me exactly what had gone down. I couldn't stop the grin that spread across my face. I called him, and the second he picked up, I could hear the chaos in the background, his sister screeching, his mom yelling, doors slamming. He barely had time to get a word in before she started wailing about how her hair was ruined. Turns out, she had used my conditioner, and now had bright purple streaks running through her blonde hair. I imagined her standing in front of the bathroom mirror, staring in horror as the streak set in, and I couldn't help but feel a deep, satisfying sense of justice. Because the best part? She couldn't even pretend she hadn't used it. She couldn't lie her way out of this one. The proof was right there, all over her head. She immediately ran to her mother, expecting to be comforted, expecting the rage to be directed at me. But for the first time ever, that didn't happen. Her mother took one look at her and lost it. Not at me, not at my boyfriend, but at her. Because apparently, looking like a low-class punk, her mother's words, not mine, was more offensive to her than the actual act of stealing. The same mother who had completely dismissed my feelings, the same mother who had defended her daughter's blatant thievery, suddenly had a problem now that there was a visible consequence. I could only imagine the conversation, her sister wailing about how I must have done something to the conditioner, her mother snapping that she wouldn't look like this if she had just left my things alone. For a brief moment, I felt vindicated. This was what I had wanted. Not just petty revenge, but an actual acknowledgement that she was in the wrong. And for a second, I thought, this is it. Maybe now they would finally hold her accountable. Maybe now she would understand that actions have consequences. But of course, that would have been too easy. Instead, her mother pivoted. She turned on my boyfriend. Because somehow, this was his fault. She accused him of allowing this drama to poison their home, of letting me manipulate him into turning against his family. She ranted about how I was causing chaos, how I was the problem, how he needed to get his priorities straight. And then she said the one thing I had always suspected she would say but hoped she never would. She suggested that he stop seeing me. Not because I had done anything wrong. Not because I was toxic or cruel or bad for him. But because I was disrupting their family dynamic. That night, my boyfriend showed up at my place looking completely wrecked. He barely got through the door before he just collapsed onto my couch, rubbing his face like he was trying to physically wipe away the stress. I sat down beside him, waiting for him to say something, but when he finally did, his voice was barely above a whisper, "I don't know what to do." And I believed him. Because the truth was, he was stuck. He loved me, but he also loved his family. No matter how toxic they were, no matter how much his mother played favorites, they were his family. And he wasn't ready to walk away from them. I could see it all over his face. He was breaking under the pressure, stretched so thin between trying to do what was right and trying to keep the peace. And I knew that as much as I wanted to stand my ground, as much as I wanted to keep fighting for my place in his life, this wasn't just about me anymore. And for the first time, I started wondering if this was a battle worth fighting. Update 2. After everything that had already happened, I thought, hoped, that my boyfriend's sister would finally back off. That the shame of being caught red-handed, of having undeniable video evidence thrown in her face, would be enough to make her think twice. That maybe she'd finally feel at least a little embarrassed about her actions, enough to put an end to the endless cycle of stealing and lying. That the streaks of purple in her hair would serve as a permanent, unavoidable reminder that actions have consequences. That she'd look in the mirror every day and remember that I wasn't just going to roll over and let her walk all over me. But nope. If anything, she doubled down. At first, it was subtle. Little things. Small, almost imperceptible shifts that, to anyone else, would have seemed insignificant. A missing lip gloss. A mysteriously relocated hoodie. A bottle of lotion that felt just a little lighter than I remembered. Individually, they were things I could have ignored. But I noticed. I always noticed. And yet, I tried to convince myself that I was imagining it. That after everything that had already gone down, I was just hyper-aware of my surroundings. That I was looking for a reason to be angry. That I was making something out of nothing. I kept reminding myself of how exhausting the last confrontation had been, how my boyfriend had been crushed under the weight of the fallout. I didn't want to add more stress to an already impossible situation. So I told myself to let it go. I reminded myself that I was in their house, that his mother had already made it painfully clear she wasn't going to take my side. That no matter how right I was, I would always be the outsider in this house. That there was no winning against a mother who had decided, from the very beginning, that I was the villain in her family's story. So I stayed quiet. I let the little things slide. Until I couldn't. One afternoon, I went over to my boyfriend's place, exhausted from a long, draining day. I had been looking forward to nothing more than curling up with him, throwing on one of my hoodies, and pretending for a few blissful hours that his family wasn't his family. But the second I stepped inside the house, I felt it. That gut-wrenching, skin-prickling feeling that something was off. At first, I couldn't place it. It was just a shift in the air, something so subtle I might have brushed it off if I weren't already conditioned to expect the worst. But then I stepped into the kitchen, and I saw her. Standing there like she owned the place. Wearing my clothes. And not just an old hoodie. Not just something I had left there and forgotten about. One of my favorite outfits. A carefully put together, coordinated set. The kind I had specifically left at my boyfriend's place because I actually wore it. The kind I would have immediately noticed if it had gone missing. I stopped dead in my tracks, my stomach twisting into knots. For a split second, my brain tried to rationalize it. Tried to come up with some kind of reasonable explanation. Maybe she accidentally grabbed it. Maybe she thought it was hers. Maybe. But no. I had never once seen her wear anything remotely similar to my style. I knew what her wardrobe looked like, and this wasn't it. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a misunderstanding. And the worst part? She looked completely unbothered. She didn't even flinch when she saw me. Didn't look guilty. Didn't look embarrassed. She just stood there, casual as ever, like this was the most normal thing in the world. Like she had every right to be wearing something that wasn't hers. I lost it. I didn't yell. I didn't need to. The sharpness in my voice was enough. I demanded to know what the hell she was doing, why she was still taking my things after everything that had already happened. And she? She just shrugged. Like I was the one being dramatic. Like I was blowing things out of proportion. She didn't even try to deny it this time. Didn't make up some elaborate excuse or pretend she didn't know what I was talking about. She just tossed out a casual, indifferent, it was just sitting there. As if that justified anything. As if my belongings were public property, up for grabs the second I wasn't actively holding them in my hands. As if she hadn't already been caught stealing, hadn't already been humiliated, hadn't already faced some level of consequence for her actions. That was it. That was the moment I snapped. I told her, point blank, that she had no right to keep taking my things. That I was done playing games. That if she ever touched my stuff again, I was going straight to their mom, again. That I didn't care how much of a disaster the last confrontation had been. That I didn't care if their mother wanted to twist the situation in her favor. I was done letting her get away with it. And that's when everything changed. The smirk disappeared. The casual indifference drained from her face like a flipped switch. For the first time since this entire mess had started, she hesitated. And in that moment, I knew. This wasn't just impulsive behavior. This wasn't just some entitled little sister acting out because she thought she could get away with it. This was something else. I watched as she shifted on her feet, eyes flickering away from mine, mouth twitching like she was trying to decide whether or not to say something. And then, just as I was about to snap at her again, she let out a long, heavy sigh. Not defensive. Not angry. Just tired. And then she dropped the bombshell. She looked down at the floor, voice barely above a mumble, and said, "This isn't even my fault." I stared at her, barely processing the words before she continued. "Mom told me to do it." At first, I thought she was lying. It was instinctual, the automatic assumption that she was just trying to shift the blame, to squirm her way out of trouble the same way she always had. It was so easy to assume she was just throwing out a desperate excuse, grasping at anything that would take the heat off her. But the more she talked, the more it started to make way too much sense. It was in the way she said it, not with defiance or smugness, but with something else. Something that almost sounded like relief, like she had been carrying this weight for too long and was finally letting it go. She wasn't trying to get out of trouble, she was just tired. And as the words kept coming, as she unraveled the full truth, it hit me like a freight train. Their mother had told her to do it. She had encouraged her to take my stuff. Not just to be selfish, not just because she thought she was entitled to it, but to push my boundaries. To make things uncomfortable for me. To slowly wear me down, until I was either too exhausted to fight back or I walked away entirely. She didn't want me there. She didn't think I was right for her son. And instead of having a mature conversation, instead of trusting him to make his own decisions, she decided to sabotage our relationship from the inside. She had weaponized her own daughter, using her as a tool to manipulate and test me in ways I hadn't even realized. Her logic was twisted. If I truly cared about him, if our relationship was strong enough, then things like missing belongings, crossed boundaries, and endless gaslighting shouldn't matter. If I really wanted to be with him, then these small acts of theft and manipulation shouldn't be enough to drive me away. She had planned this. Every time I had second-guessed myself, every moment I had wondered if I was overreacting, she had counted on that. She had orchestrated this entire thing with the confidence that I would do exactly what I had been doing all along, doubt myself. I felt sick. All the mental gymnastics I had put myself through, trying to justify things, trying to keep the peace, trying not to rock the boat, it had all been intentional. Every time I had tried to convince myself I was imagining it, every time I had swallowed my frustration for the sake of avoiding another confrontation, it had all played into her hands perfectly. I didn't waste another second. I told my boyfriend everything. Every last detail. And the worst part? He didn't even look surprised. He just looked tired. Like some part of him had already known, deep down, but hadn't wanted to admit it to himself. Like this was just confirmation of something he had spent years trying not to acknowledge. He sat there, silent, absorbing the weight of it, and I watched as the realization settled into his bones. But hearing it confirmed, that crushed him. That same night, he confronted his mother. There was no hesitation, no delaying it, no pretending like he hadn't heard what he had heard. He walked straight into the fire, ready to hear whatever excuses she had to throw at him, ready to push back against them all. And of course, she denied it at first. She acted offended that he would even suggest such a thing, insisted that I must have twisted things, that his sister was misunderstanding her words. But the cracks started showing almost immediately. Because for the first time, he wasn't just accepting her explanations. He wasn't nodding along, letting himself be convinced. And when she realized he wasn't buying it, she changed tactics, she justified it. She looked him in the eye and told him she had been protecting him. As if encouraging her daughter to steal my things was some noble act of motherly love. As if undermining our relationship and making me feel unwelcome was her duty as a mother. As if she had no choice but to manipulate the situation, because I was the problem and she had simply been trying to open his eyes before it was too late. She cried. She yelled. She did everything she could to twist the situation into something where she was the victim. And when that didn't work, she turned to guilt. She told him he was choosing me over his family, accused him of abandoning the people who had always been there for him. But this time, he didn't let it slide. He told her, point blank, that she had crossed a line. That he was an adult, and he was done letting her control his life. That this wasn't love, this was manipulation. And that no matter how much she tried to frame it as protecting him, he wasn't a child anymore. He didn't need her to dictate his relationships or test his girlfriend to see if she was worthy. And for once, she had nothing to say. She just stood there, caught in the mess of her own making, unable to argue with the truth when it was staring her in the face. In the end, things did get better, but it wasn't immediate. His mother very reluctantly apologized. Not just to me, but to him, too. It wasn't a real apology, not in the way I had hoped for. It was stiff, forced, delivered more out of obligation than actual remorse. But it was still an admission. It was still something. And as much as I hated her, as much as I wanted her to be the kind of person who could take responsibility and mean it, I knew that this was probably the best I was ever going to get. His sister, though, she actually meant it. She sat me down, looked me in the eye, and admitted that she had let her mother manipulate her. That she had done things she wasn't proud of. That she had been pushed into it but had still made the choice to go along with it. And then she said the words I never thought I'd hear, I'm sorry. And over time, we managed to move forward. Now, things are different. Not bad, just different. His mom still has her moments, but she knows she can't pull the same stunts anymore. There's a distance between us that will probably never fully go away, but I've made my peace with that. I no longer expect warmth from her, and she no longer tries to pretend she approves of me. But she also knows that if she tries to push me out again, she'll lose her son in the process. His sister and I are on much better terms. There's no more tension, no more passive-aggressive jabs. And my boyfriend? He finally sees his family's toxic patterns for what they are. So, was I the asshole? No. But looking back, I think this whole thing needed to happen. Because now, there are no more illusions. No more pretending. And honestly, I'd rather deal with an honest mess than a fake peace.